Wife left me for my cardiologist after my heart attack. The medical malpractice suit made both their hearts skip beats. The chest pain hit me like a freight train on a Tuesday morning while I was mowing the lawn. One moment I was pushing the mower around our white picket fence. The next I was face down in the grass, clutching my chest and gasping for air. My neighbor rushed over and called 911, and within minutes I was being wheeled into the emergency room of our local hospital. The cardiologist who took my case was this smooth-talking guy in his early 40s, with perfectly groomed hair and expensive cologne that lingered in the room long after he left. He had this confident way of speaking that made you feel like you were in the best hands possible. During my 3-day stay, he visited my room multiple times a day, always spending extra time explaining procedures and checking on my comfort level. What struck me as odd was how my wife seemed to light up whenever he entered the room. She would straighten her hair, adjust her blouse, and suddenly become more animated in her conversations. I chalked it up to her being nervous about my condition and wanting to make a good impression on the specialist who was supposed to save my life. The recovery period at home was brutal. I could barely climb the stairs without feeling winded, and simple tasks like taking out the trash left me exhausted. My wife became increasingly distant during those weeks, often leaving the house for hours at a time claiming she needed to run errands or visit her sister. When I asked her to stay home and help with my recovery, she would get defensive and accuse me of being clingy. 3 months after my heart attack, she dropped the bombshell. She was leaving me for someone else, someone who understood her needs better and could provide the emotional support she deserved. When I pressed her for details about this mystery man, she reluctantly admitted it was my cardiologist. The same man who had literally held my heart in his hands was now stealing my wife. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had experienced during the heart attack. 22 years of marriage, 3 kids, a mortgage, shared dreams, and countless memories were being thrown away for what she called her soulmate. She packed her bags that same evening and moved into his downtown apartment, leaving me alone in our empty house with nothing but medical bills and a broken heart. The divorce proceedings were messy and painful. She wanted half of everything, including the house we had built together from the ground up. Her new boyfriend had apparently advised her to get the best attorney money could buy, and she followed his guidance to the letter. Every meeting with the lawyers felt like another knife being twisted in my chest. During one particularly heated discussion about asset division, something clicked in my mind. I started thinking about the timeline of events surrounding my heart attack and the subsequent treatment. The more I reflected on those days in the hospital, the more certain inconsistencies began to emerge in my memory. I remembered how the cardiologist had insisted on a particular medication regimen that seemed overly aggressive for my condition. When I had questioned him about potential side effects, he had dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand and assured me that his approach was cutting edge. The medication had made me feel terrible, causing dizziness, nausea, and severe fatigue that lasted for weeks. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to request my complete medical records from the hospital. What I discovered when I finally received the thick manila envelope made my blood run cold. The dosage of one of the medications was nearly double what was recommended for someone with my weight and condition. Even more disturbing was a note in the file indicating that the cardiologist had overridden a pharmacy warning about the excessive dosage. I took the records to another cardiologist for a second opinion, and his reaction was immediate and alarming. He explained that the medication protocol I had been given was not only inappropriate but potentially dangerous. The excessive dosage could have caused serious complications, including irregular heartbeat, kidney damage, and even death in some cases. Armed with this new information, I contacted a medical malpractice attorney who specialized in cardiac cases. She reviewed my records with her own team of medical experts and confirmed what I had suspected. The treatment I had received was not just substandard but potentially life-threatening. The attorney was particularly interested in the timeline and suggested that the cardiologist might have been distracted or impaired during my treatment. The investigation that followed revealed a pattern of questionable decisions and treatment protocols that the cardiologist had been using with several patients over the past year. Hospital administrators had apparently received complaints from other patients and their families, but nothing substantial had been done to address the issues. It seemed like the medical board was more interested in protecting their colleague than ensuring patient safety. As we built our case, another shocking detail emerged from the hospital records. The cardiologist had actually visited my wife in the hospital cafeteria during my treatment, and security footage showed them having what appeared to be intimate conversations. The timestamps indicated that these meetings occurred while I was supposed to be receiving his full attention and care. The realization that my wife and my cardiologist had been developing their relationship while I was fighting for my life added another layer of betrayal to an already devastating situation. It explained why she had been so eager to spend time at the hospital and why she had seemed so knowledgeable about my treatment plan. They had been planning their future together while I was unconscious and vulnerable. The medical malpractice lawsuit we filed sent shockwaves through the local medical community. The hospital initially tried to settle quietly, but we refused their offers and demanded a public trial. The local newspaper picked up the story, and soon the entire town was buzzing with gossip about the scandal involving the respected cardiologist and his patient's wife. My ex-wife tried to distance herself from the controversy, claiming she had no knowledge of any medical malpractice. She insisted that their relationship had developed naturally after my recovery and that she had never interfered with my medical care. However, the evidence we had gathered painted a very different picture of the timeline and her involvement. The trial lasted for 6 weeks and featured testimony from medical experts, hospital staff, and other patients who had experienced similar issues with the cardiologist. The prosecution presented evidence showing that his judgment had been compromised by personal relationships and that he had repeatedly violated standard medical protocols. The defense argued that his treatment decisions were within acceptable limits and that any complications were due to my underlying health conditions. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with a verdict in our favor. They awarded damages that not only covered my medical expenses, but also included compensation for pain and suffering, emotional distress, and the impact on my future earning potential. The amount was substantial enough to secure my financial future and send a clear message to the medical community about accountability. But the real bombshell came during the penalty phase of the trial. The medical board presented evidence that the cardiologist had been under investigation for substance abuse issues that had been carefully hidden from patients and colleagues. Apparently, he had been struggling with prescription drug addiction for over 2 years, which explained the erratic decision-making and poor judgment that had characterized my treatment. The revelation about his drug problem cast my ex-wife's relationship with him in an entirely new light. She had left me for someone who was not only professionally compromised, but also battling a serious addiction. The confident, successful doctor she thought she was getting was actually a man whose career and personal life were built on lies and deception. The cardiologist's medical license was revoked, and he faced criminal charges for prescription drug fraud and patient endangerment. My ex-wife found herself suddenly single again, but this time with a much diminished bank account and a reputation that had been tarnished by association with the scandal. The downtown apartment she had been living in was repossessed, and she was forced to move back in with her parents. The hospital settled with several other patients who had been affected by the cardiologist's negligence, and new protocols were implemented to prevent similar situations in the future. The medical board launched a comprehensive review of oversight procedures and promised stricter monitoring of physicians with substance abuse issues. My recovery, both physical and emotional, took longer than I had anticipated. The stress of the trial had taken its toll on my heart condition, and I required additional procedures to address complications that had developed. However, the financial settlement allowed me to focus on my health without worrying about mounting medical bills or employment issues. The most unexpected outcome of the entire ordeal was reconnecting with my high school sweetheart, who had reached out after reading about the trial in the newspaper. She had gone through her own divorce several years earlier and understood the pain of betrayal and the challenge of rebuilding your life after such a devastating experience. Our friendship gradually developed into something deeper, built on mutual understanding and shared experiences. 6 months after the trial concluded, I received a call from my ex-wife asking if we could meet for coffee. She looked tired and older than her years, and it was clear that the events of the past year had taken a significant toll on her appearance and demeanor. She apologized for her actions and tried to explain how she had been manipulated by someone she thought was trustworthy and successful. I listened to her explanation without interrupting, but I felt no anger or resentment toward her anymore. The woman sitting across from me seemed like a stranger, someone whose choices and values were completely foreign to me. I realized that the person I had been married to for over 2 decades had perhaps never really existed, or at least had changed so fundamentally that our relationship had become impossible. She asked if there was any chance we could work things out, especially now that the truth about her former boyfriend had come to light. I explained that too much had happened for us to ever go back to what we had been, and that I was focused on moving forward with my life rather than dwelling on the past. She seemed to understand, though I could see the disappointment in her eyes. The final twist in this bizarre story came a year later when I received a letter from the state prison system. The cardiologist, who had been sentenced to 5 years for his various crimes, was requesting to speak with me as part of his rehabilitation program. He wanted to make amends for the harm he had caused and to explain his side of the story. Against the advice of my attorney and my family, I agreed to meet with him. The man I encountered in the prison visiting room was a shadow of the confident doctor I had known. He had lost weight, his hair was gray and unkempt, and his expensive clothes had been replaced with a standard orange jumpsuit. The transformation was so complete that I almost didn't recognize him. He apologized profusely for his actions and explained how his addiction had clouded his judgment and compromised his ability to provide proper medical care. He admitted that his relationship with my wife had been wrong and that he had taken advantage of her vulnerability during my medical crisis. Most surprisingly, he revealed that he had actually been trying to help me by using an experimental treatment protocol, but his impaired judgment had led him to make dangerous dosage errors. The meeting lasted for 2 hours, and by the end I found myself feeling something I never expected toward this man: pity. His life had been completely destroyed by his own choices and actions, and he would spend the next several years paying for his mistakes. My ex-wife had moved on and found someone new, but he was facing the consequences of his behavior alone. As I drove home from the prison, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed over the past 2 years. The heart attack that had nearly killed me had actually led to discoveries and experiences that had ultimately made me stronger and more self-aware. The betrayal that had devastated me had cleared the way for new relationships and opportunities that I might never have pursued otherwise. The medical malpractice settlement had provided financial security, but more importantly, it had restored my faith in the justice system and the importance of holding people accountable for their actions. The trial had been difficult and emotionally draining, but it had also given me a sense of purpose and the satisfaction of knowing that other patients would be protected from similar negligence. My new relationship was built on honesty, mutual respect, and shared values that had been tested by life's challenges. We took things slowly and carefully, both of us having learned from our previous mistakes and disappointments. The physical limitations from my heart condition were still present, but they no longer defined my daily existence or my future possibilities. The house that had once felt empty and haunted by memories of my failed marriage gradually became a home again. I redecorated the rooms, planted a new garden, and filled the space with laughter and conversation from friends and family who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. The white picket fence where my heart attack had begun was now a symbol of new beginnings rather than lost dreams. Looking back on everything that had happened, I realized that the chest pain on that Tuesday morning had been the catalyst for the most transformative period of my life. The betrayal, the medical malpractice, the legal battles, and the financial settlement had all been necessary steps in a journey that had ultimately led to a better, more authentic version of myself. The cardiologist and my ex-wife had both gotten what they deserved, but more importantly, I had gotten what I needed: justice, closure, and the opportunity to build a life based on truth and genuine connection rather than deception and convenience. My heart, both literally and figuratively, had been broken and repaired, and it was now stronger than it had ever been before. The final chapter of this story is still being written, but I'm confident that it will be filled with health, happiness, and the kind of love that can only come from surviving life's most challenging tests. The medical malpractice suit had indeed made both their hearts skip beats, but it had also taught me that sometimes the most painful experiences can lead to the most rewarding outcomes.